Ka pā kia ora tātou ko huhu mai nei. I runga i tēnei o ngā whenua upurangi me ki. Tēnei te rōpura tō tangata e mihi atu ana kia koutou ka tatu mai ki te tautoko i tēnei nā kaupapa. E mihi ana mātou kia koutou katoa. Kia ora everybody and thank you for joining in to our Toyako webinar series. I guess this kaupapa is about us providing an opportunity to share awesome kaupapa and mahi that are going on across Aotearoa. Just to let you guys know that the webinar will be recorded and it will be added to our website within a week or so, where all our other Toyako webinars are able to be accessed. So as we go through the webinar today, we'll have the ability to ask questions down in the chat boxes below or the Q&A section. And as we go through things, we'll allow you the opportunity to work together in this kaupapa. So what I'll do is I'll get Jordan to intro himself shortly, but tuatahi e mihi ana kia koe e te tuakana. Koe nei no māta ki te whiwhi, ko tā mai koe te aki i a mātou i roko i tēnei ao kori me ki. So Dr. Jordan Waiti is going to share with us his kaupapa around saltwater sensations, te ao Māori and a sense of place through Heke Ngaru. E mihi ana kia koe e hoa, we're looking forward to your kōrero, and mau e kawe a tēnei kaupapa e hoa. Kia rā.
Kia ora Dario, koutou hoki o te toi tangata, whai wā koutou ki ahei au te kauhau i te ata nei, tēnei te mihi, anō hoki kia koutou te hunga e whakarongo ana, tēnei te mihi hoki kia koutou katoa. Ko Te Aramoana Waiti tōku ingoa, te tautoku pāpā, e uri ahau o Ngāti Pikiao, Te Arawa Waka, me Ngāti Mahanga o Tainui Waka, te tautoku māma, he uri ahau o Te Rarawa, ara i te tino nota, wāhi paku e kia nei ko ahipara. So kia ora rā tātou katoa. Today I'm just gonna talk about a little bit of research I've been doing around a sense of place amongst Māori surfers. It came about through a MB project that I'm a part of, where just close to finishing it, around developing management guidelines for surf break protection. So just developing some guidelines to help councils or developers manage the protection of surf breaks around the motu. If you're unfamiliar with surf breaks, they not only are they important for recreation, and also for a lot of the main surf breaks around our motu, they bring in a lot of tourist dollars to those regions, but also for Māori, it's another way of protecting our, I don't want to say wāhi tapu, but similar type of areas around the motu for us as Māori. And part of my role was engaging with local iwi around the motu, and also trying to gather a Māori perspective on how important these surf breaks are for us as Māori surfers. Just want to begin with this quote here by his fellow Timothy Leary. He was a psychologist out of the States. He's got a colourful academic background where he was getting his students to use psychoactive drugs as a form of therapy. But anyway, I bring this quote up because something I've come across over the years, views from my whānau and views from other people in academia, is that surfers are just wasters, druggies, all surfers are on the dole, the sort of the dregs of society, and so there's a lot of that sort of narrative around amongst our whānau and amongst other people throughout the motu. So this quote here is talking about being present in the moment. So surfers are the throwheads of mankind, not the dregs. They aren't the black sheep of humanity, but the futurists, and they are leading the way to where man ultimately wants to be. The act of the ride is the epitome of be here now, and the tube ride is the most accurate form of that, which is your future is right ahead of you, the past is exploding behind you, and your wake is disappearing. Your footprints are washed from the sand. It's a non-productive, non-depletive act that's done purely for the value of the dance itself, and that is the destiny of man. In some ways, so the quote's sort of saying, one, it's a non-depletive act, it's not using up any resources, and it's also saying, he's also mentioning how you have to be in the moment when you're surfing. A lot of outside noise you have to forget about and just focus on the task at hand, which in this case was getting through that tube. And to also start us off, just going to give a little bit of history around Te Ao Māori and surfing. So a lot of Māori aren't familiar with our history of surfing. It doesn't have the participation numbers like something like Wakaama, and there's not much recorded history. So the first sort of documented accounts came in the 18th century from people like our good mate Old Best, fella Beatty, and they were the first ones to actually document Māori riding waves. And back in those days, we were riding waves on various types of equipment, such as kōpapa, just flat planks of wood. We were riding waves in our canoes, both sitting down and standing, and then using poha as well. Especially down in Kaitahu, they would blow up their kelp bags, tie them off, and then put each under the armpits and then ride the waves in like that. My grandmother, she was born and bred up in Whangape, which is a harbour, 2 harbours south of Ahipara, real remote place. And she said when they were kids, they used to, after they'd gather kaimoana out on the reef, they'd have like a bodyboard, but it was wood, sideways, a long one, and they would hold over that and then catch waves and using that papa. And then on that wood as well was all their kaimoana. So they used it as a form of transport, I suppose, to get their kaimoana back into shore. And then, however, with the arrival of the missionaries, not 100% sure why, but there was a decrease in wave riding amongst Māori. Probably also our land wars and then the wars with Pākehā sort of, I suppose we didn't have time to do that stuff. Here's a quote. So I just want to cover some quotes from the 1800s around Māori and surfing. So the Māori of New Zealand, like unto his Polynesian brethren, was absolutely and thoroughly at home in the water. He practiced surf riding with and without boards, as also in small canoes, as did the Hawaiians and others. He was a remarkably fine swimmer. This sport was indulged in by both youths and adults, including females, and one might see 30 or 40 riders coming in together on a big wave. So these are just examples of how Heke Ngaru was a part of our day-to-day activities back in the days. This final quote is from Skinner. So he was down in by the Moko River, sort of just north Taranaki, south Waikato, and he noticed this chief, Te Rangi Tuataka. The 60-year-old rangatira was in the stern of a 2-man waka. He always perfectly timed the catching of the waves and the turn at the end of the run. So even a 60-year-old back in those times, surfing on his canoe and managing to pull out of the wave at the end. So again, it's just another example of the history that we have of Heke Ngaru. Now, I just want to cover if we think about some of the well-being aspects of surfing, we'll look at Te Taha Hinengaro, we'll all be familiar with that. So here's a number of points that a number of cognitive abilities that you develop as the more time you spend in the water surfing. One, it's patience. You've got to have patience waiting for the waves. You could be waiting 10 minutes, could be waiting 40 minutes to catch one wave. Teaches you patience. Also focus and concentration. Once you're riding the board, like I said before, you sort of, all the outside cognitive noise, you have to forget about that and just focus on trying to stay on top of the board, standing up and then riding the wave correctly. Decision making, one, you have to decide when waves are approaching, is that the wave you're going to take, or do you wait for the next one? Once you're on the wave, you got to decide whether you turn or whether you trim, those sort of things. You need to develop an awareness of the area that you're surfing in, the rocks, objects nearby, other surfers in the water. Surfing is one of the, I can only think of one of the only activities or sports or pastimes where you're watching or viewing the field, in this case the beach, for a whole day. So, you know, surfers might sit at the beach and watch it hours on end, just waiting for waves, looking for rips, trying to figure out which are the good tides. Whereas, like if you're playing rugby, you just rock up to the field. It's always the same, 100 meters by 80. If we rock up for basketball, the court's always the same. But for surfing, it's the oceans are ever changing, so you need to have a good understanding and awareness of how that particular beach works. If you don't, then you can get into trouble. So what that brings us to our next point around understanding of the sea waves, rips, tides, currents, how to read weather maps, so that when you choose to go out, you're more than likely to get some waves. And another thing that's been overseas a lot lately, they've been using surfing, like other sports, as a form of therapy. In this case, it's hydrotherapy. There's studies from the States and Portugal. States are working with war veterans who've come back with post-traumatic stress syndrome. They're doing stuff with kids with schizophrenia. Portugal, they're using surfing as a means of developing mental health amongst sort of SIFS kids. And then also there's a lady over in the Mount working with Māori. She's a Pākehā lady, but she's working with Māori who have been through the justice system. And she does like a 6-week wānanga program around using surfing as a means of developing life skills and good decision making. And what a lot of time you hear surfers talking about, oh, I go surfing because I can block everything out, and it sort of clears all that cognitive noise and stuff that might be going on through your head. Taha tinana in surfing is quite obvious. It's a full body workout. Paddling is working your upper body, and then when you're on the wave, it's all about compression and extension. So sort of like squats and lunges. So it's your lower body. But a point of difference with surfing compared to other sort of water sports, especially those that are on top of the water, such as wakaama and sort of kite surfing and all of that, is you're immersed in the water. So the first thing you do when you paddle out is you're going to have to duck dive and put your head underwater and come up. As soon as you duck dive, the mammalian dive reflex kicks in. The mammalian dive reflex is something that's within all mammals and humans. And the first thing it does is it relaxes your heart rate. And then it also constricts your veins so that less blood is going out to your extremities. It's all coming into the middle, into your mind. So the one, it relaxes you, and two, it sends the blood to where it's needed, which is in your core to keep you warm if that's needed at that point. So yeah, the mammalian dive reflex is something that you experience every time you go surfing, and as soon as you duck dive, that sense of calmness comes over you. Now, if we move on to Te Taha Wairua, obviously surfing gives you an opportunity to connect or reconnect with our Māori deities. Might be Tangaroa and Hinemoana, might be your local kaitiaki, might be the local guardians for your hapu or kāinga or wherever you're surfing. Gives another opportunity to reaffirm your connections to your tūranga waiwai if you're surfing within your tribal boundaries. And also we're trying to promote more Māori karakia as opposed to Christian prayer before we enter the water. And of course, when you're engaging with your atua or kaitiaki, or you're within your tūranga waiwai, you get that sense of transcendence. All of us would have felt it before. If, now with our over the last 20 years, there's been a big push amongst Māori to conduct our physical activities outside of the gyms and out in te taiao. Might be running up your maunga, might be running through the ngahere, running along the beach or doing kiorahi on the beach, all those sort of physical activities. We've all had that sense of transcendence and just that sort of buzz it gives you to be physically active in te taiao instead of in a concrete building on a treadmill. Do I answer that question now, or?
Quick.
I'll do it now. Okay. Feel need to be motivated to go surfing, getting up early hours, hitting the cold water and working with the tides. Do you ever align with the maramataka? Or is it that you feel like surfing that day, so you go? My knowledge of the maramataka is very, very limited. It's something I've been wanting to get into more, especially as it's become more, some of that knowledge is more open now, like with Rangi Mātāmua's kōrero, Matua Mahika's kōrero, Rereata. But yeah, I'm not too familiar with its connections to the maramataka. So me and my mates and all that, we go surfing, it's just dependent on Tangaroa and our atua and what they're serving up for us that day in terms of what's happening in the ocean. Do you believe frustrated? Often. Surfing's it's a difficult activity. It's slow progressions. I started in my teens, but bodyboarding, and then wasn't till my late teens that I started stand-up surfing, and it's just been a very slow progression ever since then. And it's the same pretty much for everyone. But surfing's one of those things where one day you could be ripping up like Kelly Slater, next day you go up and it's like you've just started again. But you want to get back, it motivates you to go back again the next day to get back to where you were. It's just, yeah, because the ocean's changing every day, no wave is the same. You're never going to catch the same wave again. It's just, the ocean's just forever moving and the waves are forever different. Okay, I'll move on. So like I said at the beginning, this paper came about, or this little bit of research came about through the surf break management project. And we're wanting to gather some information around Māori surfers' connections to place. Some of you will be familiar with the notion of green space, so how ngahere, exercising in the fields, and the health benefits associated with greenery. And then blue space is similar, but it focuses on the ocean and the health benefits that, not just being physically active in those environments, but just being present in those blue space environments and the health benefits that come from that. Now overseas there's a ton of literature and research around blue space, but there's a very, very limited research from Indigenous perspectives, and also from a surface perspective. But one lady that has done it quite a bit is Karen Ingersoll. She's a Kanaka Māori from Hawaii, and this quote sort of sums it up, and it resonates with us Māori as well. Kanaka Māori surfers have an indigenous ontology that immerses them in very different relationships to the ocean than non-indigenous surfers. Kanaka Māori connect to the sea through blood ties, viewing the seabed as part of their genealogy. Very similar to us in our whakapapa connections to a place, our whakapapa to the various atua, and our whakapapa to especially Papatuanuku, who I see, and I'm not 100% convinced of this, but we'll get to it later, represents the seabed, but that's just my thinking. Yeah. So I've done an online survey, sent it out amongst, we have a Māori surfers Facebook group. I sent it off to other Māori surfers I know throughout the motu. And yeah, and then I had some one-on-one interviews with some key informants, and then just analysed the data, the responses, and looked for common themes throughout. Very low numbers in terms of the survey. I don't know how to explain that. I would have sent out maybe 50 or so, but that's quite common with online surveys. You don't very get good responses back, and it's just a starting point. So yeah, it's a starting point in terms of this literature. So 3 themes came out. The first theme was for Māori surfers, surfing and enabled them to develop, to enhance their environmental attachments to areas. So it might be your maunga, might be your awa, and that's all determined by your knowledge of your whakapapa, pepeha, and knowledge of mātauranga Māori, and also knowledge for that certain area where you're surfing. So for example, the landmarks provide context to the location when I'm in the moana surfing. So some of the surfers commented how out at sea they can look back to shore and see if they're knowledgeable for that area. They know that there was an ancient pā, or they know that a battle happened over there on that beach and stuff like that. I particularly acknowledge the maunga when surfing different areas such as Taranaki, Whitireia, Tapuanuku and the Tararua. It's important for me to do so as they often shape the bays which we surf and seem to be the kaitiaki of the area. They've been there long before I and will stay long after. So this person is acknowledging the history of that area, how those particular maunga shape the bays which he's surfing. He acknowledges those maunga as kaitiaki of some sort. And then so surfing gives this person another opportunity to recognise these areas, these environmental features that are significant for Māori, significant to our whakapapa and our pepeha, and surfing enables them to do that. Okay, I've got another question. I'll just cover that now before we move on to the second theme. When it comes to tikanga as a surfer, do you learn local kawa before you go to areas? Thinking about kiorahi and how people use to negotiate the rules. Learn local kawa, do you mean local kawa as in surfing kawa, or pepeha and whakapapa for the area? Me, myself, if I go somewhere new to surf, yeah, I try and, if I'm there with one of my bros who's a local, yeah, I ask him, like, what's this area of so-and-so, what's that maunga, all of that, just to ground myself, in that area. But then there's a lot of Māori surfers who just not into that. They just want to go catch waves. But there's others that are more interested in the history of the area and some of that. In terms of surfing kawa, it's pretty, surfing kawa is pretty much the same throughout the world. Although there's some areas in Aotearoa that you kind of have to be invited to surf, invited by the locals. You would have heard about a year ago, about an hour south of us out at Whangaroa, man got shot at from the shore. So yeah, he didn't follow the kawa for that area. Okay, I'll move on to the next one. Another theme that popped up amongst the Māori surfers was surfing in particular surf breaks. They were able to enhance their ancestral connections, not only to our tipuna, but also to the local kaitiaki for that area. For example, I have a connection here because the breaks that I surf most often are at the pā, where my tipuna have occupied for many generations. The next one, when I'm surfing in areas of Aotearoa where I whakapapa back to, I feel a strong sense of warmth and safety while in the water. As opposed when I'm surfing in other areas where I do not whakapapa to, that sense is somewhat weaker or non-existent. So when I'm surfing up at Shipwreck Bay in Nahipara, while you're out there, you know that you get that feeling that, oh well, hundreds and hundreds of years ago my tipuna were doing this, probably on different surfcraft, but I get to acknowledge my maunga whangatawatia, and the reefs that have provided kai for all our whānau all that time, and now I'm surfing around that area as well. And these responses sort of replicate that feeling as well. And for some of anecdotal evidence I've heard from friends is sometimes they know that there's a presence in the water. Sometimes they feel it's positive, that it's their local kaitiaki, or sometimes they feel it's negative and they feel like it's sharky. It's just situation dependent. But for us up in Te Rarawa, one of our kaitiaki is a white stingray. And some of the stories there, when the white stingray is present, it's best to come back into shore, whether you're diving or fishing or whatnot. And this kaitiaki has had implications for our safety at sea for us descendants of ahipara. Out at Raglan, there's another kaitiaki that turns up every now and then, and again, it's often a warning sign that to be careful what you're doing, so it might be time to come back in. Again, though, that depends on your knowledge of your pepeha and stuff like that, the knowledge of the area. And the last theme that popped up amongst Māori surfers was surfing in certain breaks enabled them to engage with the atua, and in a spiritual sense as well as a physical sense. For example, I feel a connection with the atua when I'm surfing, particularly with Ranginui, Papatuanuku, Tawhiri Mate and Tangaroa. All of them combine to create the conditions ideal for surfing, and they all have a large presence physically and spiritually when in the water. I feel a connection with atua at certain spots. Some are inviting and warm and some are not. There's been an occasion while surfing a remote spot, the North Island, where I felt a heavy atua while in the water, making me feel uncomfortable and forcing me to go back into land. But there have been plenty of times where the atua was positive and warm, especially at places where I whakapapa back to. So something common that popped up was from the responses was that often when these Māori surfers are going to elsewhere to surf, that sometimes they didn't feel comfortable. There was a funny wairua in the water or something. And I don't know if that's because the break they were surfing was gnarly, or if it was actual warning signs or whatnot from our atua telling them to be careful or whatnot. But yeah. Now, this is just a little table I come up with. And you'll see down the left-hand side is the various atua, and then the domain, and then and on the right-hand side is the influence on surf conditions. Now, just be aware that this is sort of more of a, if we look at our atua on the left, the generic atua that we have, a lot of people are familiar with. But I think there'll be people in the regions with their own take on who those atua could be. I'm sure Ihi will have, he'll be able to hone it down to more specific atua for these various domains or surf conditions. But anyway, I'll just cover this off anyway. We'll start with Tawhiri Mātia. So waves begin through low pressure systems. You see there on the top left. There's a low pressure system you'll see down right under the bottom of that weather map, under the bottom of the South Island. That's where the waves begin. That's where the swell generates, and then it'll come shooting up and hitting the South Island, and then wrap around up into Te Maui. So Tawhiri Mātia's influences that atua is the genesis of swell and the genesis of waves. Then we move into Papatuanuku. So as the waves, you'll see in the second picture, as the waves approach land, the bathymetry, which is the depth and the profile of the seabed, that determines how the waves come in. If it's steep, the waves will come in and smash on the shore. If it's shallow, the waves will sort of break out here and slowly dribble inshore. So Papatuanuku determines how well those waves will break once they hit our coastline. So then we'll move to Tāne Mahuta next. For some areas, like especially in Raglan, one of our breaks, we're surrounded by a bush and a mountain. Now what that does is the bush protects the waves against the wind. When you're surfing, you don't want wind because it makes the face of the wave bumpy and out of control. You just want it like sheet glass, like that third picture here. You see that's no wind at all, it's just glassy. So for back home in Raglan, without those bush line, without that ngahere behind us, we'd probably get a lot more wind through and wouldn't make our surfing conditions as ideal as possible. Then we go down to Tamanui Te Rā. Again, this is an example from Whangaroa, but during summer by about 10 or 11 a.m, the sun's been up for sort of 4 or 5 hours. It's heated up the land. So that the air on the land starts to go up into the sky, and something needs to fill in that space. And that's when the sea breezes from the sea start coming in. So we'll start getting sea breezes from the sea coming into shore. And again, that is not ideal surfing conditions because it's wind and it's coming on shore. The waves aren't very clean. So yeah, and then also the glare, the issue of glare. Many of you've been on boats fishing and stuff. The glare, looking through glare can be difficult. Go down to Ruaumoko. Again, another example from Raglan is Raglan's one of a more famous surf beach in the whole world, and part of that is because of the volcanic rock that's on the seabed, which was caused by Ruaumoko when Karioi burst its bubble thousands of years ago. So without Ruaumoko, without those volcanic rocks on our seabed, on our seafloor, raglan wouldn't be as good a wave as it is. And then lastly, of course, we have Tangaroa and Hinemoana, who provide, whose realm we are conducting this activity in. They provide us with effective, positive experiences. There's safety components around that, and also harm minimization. So I just want to point out that this example is quite specific to raglan, whangaroa, although a lot of it will be relative to, related to other breaks around the motu. Yeah, and then certain rohe will have their own take on which atua influence, or might be a certain kaitiaki that influences those surfing conditions. So yeah, just this is that picture. First tawhiri mate down bottom is creating the low pressure system as it moves up the country and hits our shorebed, seabed. The influence of papatuanuku and raumoku come into play. And then if the conditions are ideal, you'll have something like that third picture, which is not actually New Zealand, that's Indonesia. So just a couple of conclusions. For Māori surfers, a sense of place is related to our opportunities to reaffirm our connections to the environment, to the landscape, our mauna, our awa, whatnot. Opportunity to engage again with our ancestors, or to reflect on those times, and then also being in the realm of our various atua and the spiritual enhancements and cognitive enhancements that does for us as Māori. So place attachment for Māori surfers relates to the spiritual, genealogical, affective, cognitive and behavioural ties to a physical location as a result of the meanings and history within it. As an overall theme, and then one of the comments talks about this too, that seems to be a traditional form of health and safety where our mātauranga is at the forefront. Yeah, it ties back to all of this stuff around Heke Ngaru and surf breaks and being physically active in our taiao and te taiao, all relates back to our sense of cultural identity, and how physical activities such as this provide an avenue to reaffirm our cultural identity or reconnect with our cultural identity. And that's something that this fella Beaglehole and Beaglehole sort of discovered, thought about back in the 40s. Beaglehole was a physicist, he was a scientist, and he was in Parliament. But anyway, in the 40s, he wrote a book, he wrote a manuscript called Some Modern Māori. And at the time, he was trying to figure out why our Māori mental health rates at that time were lower than Pākehā. We all know now that it's flipped the script. But anyway, this is what he had to say back then. The fact that there are fewer neurotic and psychotic illness among Māori than among Pākehās in New Zealand emphasises, among other things, the tremendous value to the Māori of possessing a psychological security that comes from tribal and family security. So what he's saying is our psychological security, our psychological well-being comes from the tribal and family security that we had back in that time. This was probably urban drift, so we were still, a lot of us were still living back in our papa kāinga and our hau kāinga, and our cultural identity was strong. But then since urban drift and all of that, we've sort of changed a lot, So things like wakaama, kiorahi, surfing are other examples of where we can utilise the taiao to enhance our health and well-being. over the next few months, no, in the past couple of years, one of the high schools here in Aotearoa, Te Kōpuku, have been coming out, and I've been taking them for surf lessons, and then karakia, whakapapa whā for whaingaroa, and yeah, just sort of trying to replicate some of the stuff I've mentioned here today in these wānanga for these Māori, rangatahi Māori. And we got a lot of positive feedback because, and things, some of the comments were like, one, a lot of the kids didn't even know that surfing was a part of our history. They didn't realise that a lot of the top surfers in New Zealand are Māori. They weren't familiar with how our atua have an influence on surfing. And then for some, there were positive mental health aspects. This is the feedback I was getting from teachers, is that for a lot of these kids it was the first time they were in the water, first time surfing, but for them was their experiences, those positive, effective concepts of surfing. Yeah, one kid had been bullied at another school, so he came to Te Kōpuku, and he was kind of an outcast, big boy for his age, didn't look very physically active or anything. And during the morning session, the 2-hour session in the morning, we kept working on him to try and get him to stand up, and he was struggling a bit. Then we had lunch, and I was sitting down having lunch, and he was standing there with his board and like looking at me, and I was trying to eat my lunch, and he was just keen as to get back out there again because he wanted to crack it. So yeah, we took him back out for the afternoon session, and he managed to get up and ride some waves. And then the teacher a couple of weeks later said that one experience that he had a huge impact on his schooling for those 2 weeks following, there. A bit more self-confidence and self-esteem, because he was able to achieve this goal of standing up on the surfboard, which if you looked at him first you would have thought, oh man, the dude's going to struggle, but no, he done well. So the next few months I'll be running 6 wānanga with another group of kids from Te Kōpuku, and again we're just going to be emphasising all of the themes mentioned in here, karakia, whakapapa, and do a lot of water safety with them, because our water safety knowledge amongst Māori is not the greatest at this time, so yeah, we'll be doing a bit of that as well. So I've got a couple of questions here. Beagle Hole, who is he? Yeah, he was a psychiatrist, I think, and then he got into Parliament, I think. But there's quite a lot of writings from Beagle Hole from the 40s and that. Another question, they have a Māori nats for surfing yet? Yes, they do have a Māori nats. Anything different from mainstream competition? Yeah, I've only been to one Māori nats. I'm always away that weekend. It's mainly Labour weekend. And the feedback I've had from friends in that go is it's different to mainstream because it's more of a whānau feeling, eh? You might have your koro surfing, dad, brother, and then the little kids. Yeah, it's just a bit, it's still competitive somewhat when you get into the open grade, but the main purpose of the Māori surfing nats is just to get more Māoris into surfing, and to do it on to get more Māori into surfing in a more fun manner instead of just competition. Okay, I've got a couple of more questions. Do you run wānanga elsewhere or only in Aotearoa? I've done some in Hawke's Bay because I spent a bit of time growing up there, and I do stuff with Te Tai Timu Trust, so Zach Makware down there. been enrolled with them for about 11 years. So yeah, we do the odd one down there, but yeah, mainly just out of Kirikiriroa, Whangaroa. Some people have approached me to go elsewhere, and I'm happy to do that, but I don't want to encroach on other Māori that might be in that area who can do the same thing. And especially if I go to a rohe where I'm not familiar with the whakapapa for the area, I'd rather that someone from that area took that side, and I can just help with the lessons in that sense. Marcia asked who's a water safety partner. It's me and Mark Haimona. We're part of the Māori Advisory Board to Water Safety New Zealand. So yeah, we're in charge of the water safety component. Shah Clark says, asked, are the Nationals still on? I heard they were struggling. Yep, they had a 6-year hiatus and then sparked back up 2 or 3 years ago. So Waitara Board Riders Club down in Taranaki run that now. And yeah, from what I heard, they just do a massive job. Do you have karakia for Māori surfers that you share? I do have a couple. They are not... One I received from Te Tibu. I don't know if he's familiar with him. He sadly passed away a couple of years ago. Māori teacher from back in the days with Te Hatu Paura. I do have one from him. And then me and one of the cousins out Whangaroa just trying to think of another one that's more specific to out there and acknowledging the kaitiaki for Raglan. Yep, I can share Te Kōtuku's one. The only problem is I don't, with that karakia, when I met with him, he didn't give me the mita, so I haven't been able to crack that yet, the mita, the karakia, but you might be able to crack it. I just think I need a little bit more work with it. So yeah, we're developing something that's more specific to Whangaroa and something a bit shorter, especially for our rangatahi who don't want to read a 15-line karakia. But yeah, any other questions? I'll figure out a way to share that karakia.
Oh boy. Tuatahi, tēnei mihi ana te a koe, Jordan. It seems that Roku, we're really intrigued by the kōrero that was going on. You could tell by a lot of the pata that were coming through. I guess as we were listening to the kaupapa, there were a few sort of things that I sort of heard myself, and then in terms of surfing being a form of rongoa, and your connection to the wai. I guess our connection as Māori to the wai is inevitable. So there's just different forms of connecting to that wai. I myself would have loved to have been a surfer, probably a bit beyond my means, being 6 foot something. Makes me less stable on the board. I use that as an excuse. But just thinking about the Māori science that I was thinking about when you were talking about the kaupapa and how important the role of atua has in each of those spaces. So when listening to your kōrero, I think we were listening to a lot of the sort of whakaaro in and around the health and safety aspects that you just are aware of because of your knowledge of atua. So it's not specifically sort of between the flags or anything like that, but we just, I guess, have a connection across the board to Aotearoa Māori. So yeah, I guess thinking along the lines of whakaaro Māori, I guess makes every sort of movement, every part of kuri tinana, it allows us a more meaningful connection to a lot of our kaupapa. So e mihi ana kia koe e hoa. I know everyone's taken a lot away, so for those of you who are tuned in still, we will get a recording of this kaupapa up on our website, and we will follow up with the pātai that were asked as well. So Jordan has said that he'll be able to share that karakia. So perhaps one of our tasks will be to find the mita that suits the moana. for their karakia. Yeah, just on that note as well, thinking about future kaupapa, yeah, continue to tune into our Toyaka series, and we're going to have a lot more Aussie speakers just like Jordan, so mihi ana kia koe e wha. On another note, you probably see the screen that's shared at the moment, so Pakukorero Pānaki Te Toi Tangata Hui A Tau. Our Hui A Tau, our national hui, is going to be in Te Pukaka at Mumuru Marae on the 4th to the 6th of March. There'll be some autumn kai kōrero there as well, so if you're interested and willing to present or be an attendee, no mai haramai, you can go to our website, tangata.co.nz for a little bit more. Mihi ana kia koutou, kia pai te rā, hei ko nā koutou mai.
Kia ora koutou.